our leadership introductions. But before we do that, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge that our heart and prayers are with all the folks in last night's Virginia Beach incident, and also Boulder, Colorado, and also Georgia. Our prayers with the family and victims. We stand with you, and we'll get things started. First off, I want to acknowledge our co-hosts, the Democratic Youth Coalition, the Arlington Democrats Disabilities Caucus, the Loudoun County Democratic Committee, and the College Democrats of America, a national organization. And now I'll turn it over to our leadership to introduce themselves. I'll start with Ashi.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Ashi. I go by the She series, and I am the Chief of Staff with the Democratic Youth Coalition. I'll go ahead and popcorn over to James.
Hello, everybody. My name is James, and I am the DYC's new co-director of outreach.
Okay, perfect. I'll go ahead and turn it over to Tura to introduce our wonderful co-moderator.
Right, and before we do that, I wanted to note that we do have a straw poll for today's event that has been posted on the chat option. We will be announcing the results of the straw poll at the end of the forum. So with that being said, I'd like to introduce our moderator for today's forum, Keith. Correct me if I'm getting your last name wrong. Nagy.
Yep.
Nagy with the College Democrats of America National Organization, who's going to be running our forum today. With that, I'll turn it over to Keith.
All right, thank you so much, Tura. Thank you, Ashi, and thank you everybody at the Democratic Youth Coalition. And especially thank you to the 6 candidates who are attending our forum today. All of you are aware of the rules beforehand. We will begin with 2-minute opening statements, and we will.
Hotels, they're just expensive, like $600-700 a night.
Sorry, could
I remember when we put.
Hang on, gotta mute that. There we go. Sorry about that. We will begin with a opening statement. We did a random number generator beforehand, and the first one will go to Mr. Perryman.
My lucky day. I appreciate it. Hey everyone, my name is Sean Perryman. I'm a candidate for Lieutenant Governor. I'm so pleased to be here with you. I always share my story of how I got here, a bit of an unlikely candidate. I was first in my family to go to college, first to go to law school, and was practicing law for a number of years before I was asked to represent Donald Trump in a case against Jose Andres. And that was essentially the start of a new path for me. I quit my job, went on to work for Congressman Elisha Cummings as a congressional investigator on the House Oversight Committee. And from that day forward, I've been sort of in this struggle to try to uproot Trumpism from our communities, because it's not about him, it's about the ideology. I became the youngest president in the 102-year history of the NAACP, grew my Fairfax County chapter to be the largest one in the Commonwealth, and have been fighting injustices and pushing for progress ever since. Very happy to be with you all and tell you about my story and how I think that we can build a more equitable Virginia for everyone, that's not just for the powerful few, but that it better serves all of us, whether that's broadband access, a fair criminal justice system, or an economy that works for all of us. So looking forward to the forum. Thank you for having me. And if you want to learn more, it's perrymanforvirginia.com.
Great, thank you so much, Mr. Perryman. Next up will be Delegate Levine.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm now in my 6th year serving Alexandria, Arlington, and Fairfax County. Many of you know I was a citizen activist for decades before, and I worked as a congressional attorney, a chief lawyer for Congressman Barney Frank on the Hill. I've been looking at the role of the lieutenant governor, because I don't just want to be lieutenant governor, I want to do the job, and frankly, I want to transform what it is. The lieutenant governor is the only branch of government that is in both, the only office, I should say, in Virginia, that serves both the executive branch and the legislative branch. And since I know that Virginians are the source of our best ideas, I'd like to take what I've done already at the local level through Mark's monthly meetups and the leader of the Transparency Caucus, bringing Richmond to the folks, and actually go around Virginia and hear from you. Go to every county and city, all 133 during my time as lieutenant governor, and sit eye to eye with folks and get the best ideas and bring them back, be that conduit between the government and the people. At a time when a lot of people feel disconnected from government, we are in our Fox News and MSNBC silos. I think we need a lieutenant governor to connect us together and to take some of the best ideas. I would have the legislative agenda, as has been done in the past, but hasn't been done recently. And I would transform it into a 12-month, a year-round job so that I give full service to the people of Virginia. Look forward to this discussion.
All right, thank you, Delegate Levine. Next up is Delegate Rasoul.
Well, good afternoon, members of the Democratic Youth Coalition here, and so many folks who've come together to host us. It is great to be with you. Delegate Sam Rasoul, I'm in my 8th year in the General Assembly. And look, being elected out here in the western part of the state as a child of immigrants growing up in a working class family, it was always about building broad coalitions. As a religious and ethnic minority, it was always a spot out here where I had to find my way and find a way to build those coalitions, but really meet people where they're at. We've done that in the legislature over the past 8 years in policy and in politics over the past several terms, thinking through from a political standpoint. Not only how do we push the policy that we need, but how do we build some of those bridges? So as a member of the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus and a member of the Virginia Legislative Rural Caucus, for example, been able to focus on a common value that we share, which is equity. And those values are critically important for me to uplift. In fact, we've been able to build a whole campaign around our 3 family values. My wife and I raise our kids with always tell the truth, always be kind, and never give up. And we've crowdsourced ideas, tried to connect people with the government services that they need, and then visited. We're wanting to visit every city and county in Virginia in person in a safe way, all while being the first candidate in Virginia history to be funded 100% by individuals. We're fortunate to have endorsements from state senators on down school board members, as well as the Sunrise Movement and United Rural Democrats. We've got a broad coalition. Look, I want to be able to uplift your voice and your issues, and would love to be able to do that as your next lieutenant governor. So thank you so much for having us today.
Thank you, Delegate Rasoul. Next up is Councilor McClellan.
How are you? Thank you all for having me. As a mom of 3, 2 college students, 22, 19, and 16-year-old boys, I'm excited to be with you all tonight and know we're going to have some great conversation. I currently sit on the Norfolk City Council, where I represent 125,000 Virginians, actually the largest constituency of anybody running for lieutenant governor. And in local government, I've learned a lot of things. I've learned to be an effective listener, a coalition builder, an advocate, and a fierce ally. And I look forward to putting those skills to work as your next lieutenant governor. And I'm running for lieutenant governor to ensure we have more access to opportunity for all Virginians, and so that we can break down barriers for those who have been struggling to get ahead. As a youth myself, I moved to Virginia Beach with my family for my father's job when I was 7. And unfortunately, a few years after we arrived, my dad left, and my mom became a single mom who had to juggle multiple jobs to make ends meet. After that, I went on to the University of Virginia, and I fortunately was able to pay for college with 4 years of work study jobs and Pell Grants and lots of student loans. And then after that, after graduation, I worked in a male-dominated industry for 2 Fortune 500 companies before starting 2 businesses of my own. And when I returned to Hampton Roads, I noticed that there were a lot of families who struggled, as my mom had. So I decided to get involved, and I volunteered for organizations that helped homeless families and victims of domestic violence and folks who'd recently been incarcerated with reentry programs. And in 2008, I got involved with my local Democratic committee and became a precinct captain. And I have been organizing for great candidates up and down the ballot for years. And in 2016, I took on this role now by running against a 16-year incumbent. And despite being told at the time that it wasn't my time and that I needed to wait my turn, I beat him in 19 of 23 precincts. And I love this job. I've been focused on a lot of the issues that I'd like to do at the statewide basis, looking at access to broadband and ensuring that all Virginians have access to affordable, high-speed internet, addressing our climate and flooding issues, ensuring that we have good jobs, workforce training, and access to capital for small businesses. And civic engagement has been a big issue for me, and I hope we can talk on that today as well. We need to have more access to our elected officials, and we need to make sure that we engage more people around the Commonwealth. So I'm running for Lieutenant Governor to ensure access to opportunity for all Virginians. And thanks so much for having me.
Thank you, Councilor McClellan. Next up is Mr. Warren.
Hello, everyone. Happy Passover. I am Xavier Warren, and I want your vote to be Lieutenant Governor because Virginia, we are in a COVID crisis. We are in a racial crisis, a climate crisis, and an economic crisis that has caused hundreds of Virginia small businesses close, thousands of Virginians lose their jobs, 1 in 3 people suffer pay cuts, 1 in 4 people to go hungry, women to drop out of the workforce at an 8-time higher rate, and many people to be evicted from their homes and their apartments. See, the Lieutenant Governor actually serves on business committees that focus on generating economic development, advancing entrepreneurship, and also creating jobs. See, I've witnessed firsthand what an economic downturn can do to our communities. I was born and raised in Danville, Pennsylvania County, when textiles and manufacturing jobs shipped overseas and tobacco started to decline. Thousands of people in Central and South Virginia lost employment. What followed was the education attainment rate drop. Also, majority of people fell below the poverty line and the economic infrastructure imploded. I came from a working class family. My mother was a bioanalyst and my father was a maintenance mechanic who really wanted me to go to college. I attended and graduated from my public schools and also attended one of our historically Black colleges and university. I achieved my childhood dream, becoming an NFL sports agent, and as an entrepreneur, started a very successful federal funded agency that has secured millions of dollars for hospitals, schools, and cities and counties to be able to heal people, educate people, and create jobs for people. I look forward to sharing how my progressive values can make Virginia the leader in economic justice, racial justice, and environmental justice. Thank you. Please visit Xavier for FOR, virginiaspelledout.com to learn more. I'll look forward to answering any questions to this forum. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Warren. All right, that concludes our opening statements. Our 6th candidate unfortunately could not join us, so we are doing well on time, and we're going to proceed into the questions. The first round of question is going to be about climate policy. These are very complex topics, but please try to keep your responses to 1 minute so that we can get through all these very important questions. A study from the Georgetown Climate Center projected that Virginia will experience at least 1.5 feet of sea level rise during the next 20 to 50 years, putting coastal communities increasingly at risk. What policies will you push as Lieutenant Governor in order to tackle the climate crisis in Virginia? Delegate Levine, the first answer is for you.
Thank you for that. And obviously, Norfolk is the second most endangered city in the whole United States after New Orleans. But it's not just coastal flooding. It's even where I represent in Alexandria, we had 3 times what they call 100-year floods. They're supposed to occur once in 100 years. We had 3 of them just last year. So it requires a multimodal analysis. You've got to get rid of new fossil fuel plants online. You've got to transition away from the ones that we have. And that requires things like cap and trade to keep down on carbon, but everything from offshore wind to geothermal to making sure that we can take solar energy and sell it back to the grid. We've done a lot of this in the Virginia House of Delegates with the Virginia Clean Economy Act, but we can do a lot more. And my minute is up.
All right, thank you for keeping it short. Next up is Delegate Rasoul.
Yeah, that's actually even been revised in some places from 1.5 feet to 3 feet. And as Councilwoman McClellan can attest to it, even in Norfolk, there are so many spots where it's a struggle. But look, here's fundamentally how we need to think about the climate crisis. We will not achieve progress unless we have an intersectional coalition coming together saying we have to address the climate crisis with the fierce urgency that it deserves in a way that intentionally uplifts environmental justice communities through the economic jobs that they need in a socially just way. The reality is politically, we cannot achieve the environmental progress that we need long-term without having environmental, social, racial, and economic justice friends locking arm in arm to be able to push for this kind of justice. That's why I've championed a Green New Deal. And that's the only way for us to actually be able to do this long-term.
All right, thank you, Delegate Rasoul. Councilor McClellan, you are next.
Thank you, and thanks all for referencing Norfolk. I appreciate that. Listen, the road that I drive to City Hall is flooded several times a month on sunny days. We are home to the largest naval base in the world. We are home to one of the busiest seaports on the East Coast. And the roads that we use to access those are often flooded. This is a huge issue. So climate change, we need to be addressing both from a mitigation standpoint. How do we reduce our carbon footprint so we reduce that future flooding? But we also need to be addressing it from an adaptation standpoint. And Virginia has not done a great job there. So what I've proposed is the idea of a Commonwealth Flood Board to start to address the climate crisis, not only in coastal areas as referenced, but in Danville, in Roanoke, in Nelson County, in Alexandria, in Chesterfield, because these adaptation issues need to be addressed now. Climate change is not a future issue, it is a now issue. Listen, I've driven an electric vehicle for 3 years. I love the fact that we're working on electrifying our fleet and we're creating more EVs, charging stations around the Commonwealth. We need to focus on energy efficiency and reducing our energy burden, but we've got to address both mitigation and adaptation. And I would do that as Lieutenant Governor. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor. Next up is Mr. Warren.
Yes, this is a very important issue for me. Again, I was born and raised in Danville. I vividly remember every time it rained, Dan River would actually flood and the basement would be flooded. Again, I attended Hampton University, which is on a peninsula. 3 out of the 4 sizes around water. When every time it rains, the campus is flooded. Right now, if we are projected, if we don't do something, that my home by the sea, Hampton University, one of our great historically Black colleges, would be underwater in 100 years. So climate change is the biggest threat to our earth. What I plan to do as Lieutenant Governor is lead the charge, as in we need to increase credits to renewable energy, but also to clean energy. I want Virginia to be the national leader as in solar and wind farms. Also, I want Virginia to be the leader in EVs and incentivizing people getting credits to make the transition to electric vehicles and also in clean energy jobs. That's what I'm going to do as Lieutenant Governor, because we have to do our part at the state level to make sure that we have not only a beautiful Commonwealth, but a earth for our future.
Thank you, Mr. Warren. Mr. Perryman.
Yeah, thank you. And I think we've heard from everyone, this is a serious issue. It's an existential crisis. It's a national security issue, especially if you look at some of the naval bases we have. This is something that we have to look at from many lenses. But what I would say is I support a moratorium on fossil fuels. I support renewable electric grid by 2035. We have to move up the timeline for the Virginia Clean Energy Act. But we also have to talk about how do we get towards restoration, seagrass restoration. We should be encouraging our universities to invest in that type of research. These are all ideas that we can do to combat the climate crisis, but I think everyone here recognizes it's the biggest challenge of our lifetimes and our children's lifetimes.
Thank you, Mr. Perryman. That concludes our first question. The next question is about paid internships. Payroll audits have shown that many interns in Congress and in various government agencies go without pay for their work, the bulk of whom are young professionals. What is your stance on paid internships, and will you commit to paying your interns? Delegate Rasoul, would you like to begin?
Yes, we currently pay our interns at a rate equal to $15 an hour. We have 7 paid interns on our staff, so we're fully committed to doing that. We believe that not only does that make sense in trying to make sure that we're paying our interns well, but also it's a wonderful experience. And so for them to be able to come in and do some of this work, get involved and have a foot in the door, we've got to make sure that it's accessible to people from all walks of life. As somebody who worked 2 jobs through high school and college, for me, I think it's just critical. So we're fortunate enough to have a great team of interns who do great work for us. And I've seen so many of these wonderful people who had just 1 foot in the door and now, have gone on to bigger and better things over the course of my 8 years in the General Assembly.
Thank you, Delegate Rasoul. Councilor McClellan.
Hi, how are you? So yes, we have a fellowship program. We don't have an internship program on my campaign. If we bring on an intern who's doing full-time work, we'll absolutely be paying them. My personal experience is I had paid internships and I had unpaid internships. Fun fact, I was an unpaid intern for Jerry Springer. I know, look at Sean Perryman, look at those eyes. I thought for a bit I wanted to go into broadcast journalism, and I had an opportunity to work with him for 3 weeks when he was the anchor for the NBC affiliate in Cincinnati. I wouldn't have had that opportunity had it been a paid internship. And personally on the city council, I've had several folks who have shadowed me for a variety of summer breaks, Christmases, etc. And so I guess the question is what you call the intern. Is it an intern or a fellowship? If somebody's doing real work, they need to be paid real money. So I agree with that for sure. But I think we are looking at volunteers and fellowships right now. If we if we introduce a full-time internship program, we will pay those interns.
Thank you, Councilor McClellan. Mr. Warren?
Yes, we have paid internships, and I encourage you all to email Brandon, BRANDON at Xavier for Virginia spelled out.com. If you're interested, we have a growing population of college students and high schoolers that are very excited about our campaign. And yes, we have paid internships. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Warren. Mr. Perryman?
Yeah, I firmly believe if you work full-time, you should be given a living wage. Right now with our interns, if you want to volunteer for an intern a couple hours out of the week, we allow folks to do that. We also are giving credits. We have some interns who are getting credits for their classes. So we do try to compensate interns in the way that they ask to be compensated. So that's how we're doing it. But if we get to the point where we're having full-time interns, we will definitely pay them.
Thank you, Mr. Perryman. Delegate Levine?
So I pay my delegate interns, including a young woman that joined our staff when she was 16 years old, and actually have promoted many of them to be aides, and I would do the same as Lieutenant Governor. Look, I make sure that our interns hear everything that goes on. It's important. I remember back when I worked on the Hill in Congress, we had interns that stapled and did stuff like that. Not mine. Ours participate in debates. I bring them behind the scenes. They've heard negotiations between me and another side about a bill. And frankly, I've asked their views on bills when I'm not sure how I'm going to vote. And when I do that, I tend to go to my staff and say, hey, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? So I can hear a variety of ideas. So I think it's important that we not just pay them, but bring them into the discussion.
Thank you, Delegate Levine, and thank you all for those answers. The next question is for Councilor McClellan. What is the best part about being a community advocate, and what advice would you give to young folks who have a passion for public service?
Oh my gosh, what a great question. Listen, I was very involved in the community for many years before I ran for office, and you can really make a difference. Everybody can in their communities. And as a young person, you know, I just applaud you all for getting involved and being aware of the issues. In terms of ways to get involved, I think there are a lot of things. I think volunteering for campaigns, for example, we just talked about that, learning the political process and how that works there. Attending your local city council meeting or your school board meetings, you can learn a lot. And a lot of people don't do that. So if you actually develop that relationship with your boards of supervisors or your city council members or school board members, they're going to pay attention to you. But also whether it's helping in the community from a volunteer standpoint, as I've done from, you know, helping victims of domestic violence or homeless families, I think that's really, really important there too. I started an event called Engage Norfolk right after I came onto city council. We've held it every year for 4 years. Our theme is turn your passion into action. And Lord knows the youth of today have a lot of passion, and we need you to engage and to make our world a better place. So I think there's a lot of opportunity. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Councilor. Mr. Warren?
Yep, I always believe in giving back in your time, talent, and treasure. And I do that every other weekend. I do food distribution out here in Arlington County. Also, I'm a huge advocate and supporter of my church, Alfred Street Baptist Church in Old Town Alexandria. I'm a pay a dues, tithe paying member as well, and also speaking engagements to youth. One of the things, you know, very important, after I achieved my childhood dream, again, becoming an NFL sports agent, I realized how blessed and unique I was to be able to do that. And a lot of people are unable to get good housing, quality education, healthcare, or insurance because they don't have the financial means. That's the reason why I started the federal funding agency, my company, to be able to secure the dollars to be able to help folks in need because they need that financial assistance. We have brought in over the last year over $18 million in education, healthcare, and economic development dollars. So we have the power as youth to take and be the leaders and do the charge to be able to help people out. So always give of your time, talent, and treasure.
Thank you, Mr. Warren. Mr. Perryman?
Yeah, I would say, and the question was, what's the best part of being a community advocate? Yeah, I would say that I would encourage anybody to get involved because it's not just through electoral politics that you can make a difference. I shared that, you know, my experience has been largely a lot of the changes I made was through the NAACP. That was the way that I had a voice at the table. I was able to change things in my community, to make fundamental changes. I hear all the time from young people that they were going to, you know, Robert E. Lee High School, and now they're going to John Lewis High School because of the work we did in the NAACP. So I would say that you always feel empowered and that you can do it through so many different routes. You don't have to come from a certain background. You don't have to have a certain sort of pedigree or education. You just need to care about these things and care about your community. And that's the best part of it, seeing those changes play out in front of your eyes.
Thank you, Mr. Perryman. Delegate Levine.
So I was a community activist for 20 years before I ever ran for political office in 2015. In the early 90s, I marched on Hollywood because there weren't positive portrayals of gay characters in Hollywood. When the gay establishment didn't believe that marriage equality was possible in our lifetimes, I founded Marriage Equality California. This is back in the 90s, 20 years ago when I lived there, and wrote the very first same-sex marriage equality bill in the United States. How did I do that? Well, I actually helped to elect a straight guy who supported marriage equality in a Democratic primary, again, back in the 90s. When tragedy happened to my family and my sister was murdered by her husband, I wrote a law in Tennessee to say that if you are a victim of domestic violence, that the killer or someone, the perpetrator of domestic violence, can lose access to children. And frankly, I never thought it would help my family. I just wanted to do something about it, but it ended up helping my family and brought my niece and nephew home to their grandparents. I've been involved in all kinds of community activism. I see a problem, I march. I've led more protests, frankly, than I can remember, on everything from children who've been subject of abuse to elders, subject of guardian abuse. There's a lot of activism you can do. And I'm very, very proud of my long activist record. And any cause you believe in, never, ever let them tell you it's not possible. It is, if you get to work and make a difference.
Thank you, Delegate Levine. Delegate Rasoul.
Yeah, I mean, coming from a marginalized community myself, I would say, one of the most rewarding things about being in elected office and being in my 8th year has been able to really recognize and deliver the dignity that people deserve. There's just something special about when someone needs some help or they feel like no one's there to listen. I'm able to give that to people, and it's free. And it's wonderful because I have a community where I have 86% free and reduced lunch. It's a very much a struggling community in a lot of ways. So I have a lot of folks who I just want to be there for in so many ways. And then the best advice that I can give for people who want to get involved, number one, be yourself. In politics, we're always seeing people who just want to try to be something else, maybe what they're seeing on TV. And then lastly, just remember it's your time. When I was running for office the first time in 2008, running for US House, people said it wasn't my time. I was the youngest congressional candidate in America, but I learned a lot and gained a lot out of it. So just always remember, it's your time.
Thank you, Delegate Rasoul. Thank you all for those answers. I've been informed that we are going to switch now to 30 seconds per answer, rapid fire, so that we will have plenty of time for audience questions. This next question is going to be for Mr. Warren starting off. This past Wednesday, Governor Northam signed a bill into law making Virginia the first state in the South to abolish the death penalty. What are your thoughts on capital punishment, and what other criminal justice reforms would you like to see happen under your tenure as Lieutenant Governor?
Yes, I think it's amazing that we were the first state in the South to be able to do that. We need to take it further and to have changed the Constitution and have restore the voting rights for everyone. Once they have served their time, their voting rights are restored and also their records are expunged. I believe in second chances.
Thank you, Mr. Warren. Mr. Perryman.
I supported ending the death penalty long before this. I think in addition to that, you can check out my op-eds with Steve Toscano, where we talk about ending cash bail, talk about the need to make sure we get rid of mandatory minimums. And then one of my big platform pieces is that we should never take away people's right to vote. These are just some of the criminal justice reforms that I believe we need in the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Thank you, Mr. Perryman. Delegate Levine.
This is way too much for 30 seconds. Not only do I support ending the death penalty, but I spoke about it on the House floor personally and pointed out that even though my sister was murdered, the death penalty doesn't bring her back. It could only kill an innocent person. As I sit on the Courts of Justice Committee, I am the subcommittee chair of the Public Safety Committee. It's my job to regulate the police. We've done a lot of good, but we can do a lot more. For example, there's my bill on ending police profiling that still has yet to pass. but we've done everything from looking at the way that police practice chokeholds to yes cash bail to taking mental health into concern. Honestly, you're gonna have to read my website because I got about 100 things on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Levine. Delegate Rasoul.
Yeah, against the death penalty over the past 8 years, pushed hard against it. And even when they tried to make secret the drugs that they were using for lethal injection, a bipartisan group of us actually came together to push back against that. Look, there's a whole list of reforms, but more importantly, we have to push back against the narrative. Over the past 30 or 40 years, we've lost this narrative that there's this war on crime, war on drugs, and we have to take it back and believe that we can't fall into that same Republican narrative, that we believe in a prosperous community and doing it the right way.
Thank you, Delegate Rasoul. Councillor McClellan.
I would agree with all of my colleagues who've spoken thus far on all the points. I would just add to that that there's also a local government level effort here too, that we need to be doing a better job of working with our localities to ensure that they are implementing the appropriate reforms at the local level with their police departments, ensuring that they have citizen review panels that are actually working and have the authorities to subpoena authority, et cetera, to implement these criminal justice reforms on the ground. Again, I'm the only candidate running who has that local government background and look forward to making that connection between the state and the local government.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you all for those answers. I know that was a very tough task, condensing that into 30 seconds. Next question will be, how do you intend to engage youth as Lieutenant Governor, and will you commit to creating a youth task force or advisory board so more young people have a voice in state government? First answer will go to Mr. Perryman.
There we go. Yes, I will commit to that. And I think we need to have a role for the youth. This is part of the reason I'm running. I think the Lieutenant Governor role, as I've explained, is not an inherently powerful one, it's an influential one. And we need to bring more young people to the table. That's what I did. I have a track record of that. The reason I grew the NAACP to be the largest one in the Commonwealth is because I invited in so many young people and we were able to get their voices heard. And they're the ones that are going to be pushing this movement forward. So we need to make sure that we engage them at all levels of the process early and often.
Thank you, Mr. Perryman. Delegate Levine.
I fully support a youth task force. As someone who's done the close-up program now for 20 years, I've talked to 20,000 or more, 30,000 probably high school students about their various ideas. But you know, we have to do more than a youth task force. We have to integrate young people into existing task forces. Young people have views on climate change and on income equality and racial justice and immigration, all those things. We have to bring young people into existing processes. And I think that's very important, and I commit to doing that.
Thank you, Delegate Levine. Delegate Rasoul.
Yeah, to second what Mark just said, integration into existing boards is a great point. I actually drafted the bill this year. If we didn't have the 7 bill limit, this would have been something we would have put in to make sure that we had this board. So it's something that's definitely top of mind as we move forward. But beyond that, I can tell you as a child of immigrants, we never thought about what public service would look like. And so just having extensive shadowing and internship programs, giving people the ability and youth the ability to be able to envision actually what this looks like. You can't dream about something if you don't know what it is.
Thank you, Delegate Rasoul. Councillor McClellan.
Yes, would love to have a youth task force, but I agree completely that this shouldn't just be one specific task force. It should be integrated throughout. Virginia does have a pretty robust program with their PAGE program with the House of Delegates and the senators, but that's restricted for kids who are 13 and 14 years old. I'd love to see more of our high school students and college students be participating in the state government, and would love to do that. It's something that I did as a youth myself. And experience the youth leadership camps every summer in Virginia Beach Public High School. And I would love to create that sort of system-wide, statewide rather, leadership camps across all of our public schools as well.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Warren.
My answer is yes. As someone who is an Arlington County Democrat and part of the outreach community, I know what we as youth can do together. I'm the youngest one that's running, 32 years old, and Lieutenant Governor. And I'm truly blessed because I know that, you know, we got a lot of youth from high schools and colleges are now entering the worst economic space environment, even worse back in 2008 when I entered it as a workforce. So we need to make sure that their voices are heard and they have a seat at the table.
Thank you, Mr. Warren. We will move to our final question before audience questions. What would you say is currently the most important challenge Virginia is facing, and how would you propose we address it? We will start with Delegate Levine.
Someone who introduced 47 bills in 2020, it's really hard to limit me to just one thing, because I'm going to be working on everything from income inequality to climate change to voting rights. But honestly, right now, my heart is with victims of gun violence. The fact that today we can mention the Virginia Beach shooting and people would have to say which Virginia Beach shooting tells you that we have far too many people dying at the hands of gun violence. I've been a real leader on this issue in the House of Delegates. In fact, I just had 2 gun bills passed this year, protecting you when you go to vote at the polls and when you go to serve at the Capitol. I care about a lot of issues. I'm going to focus on a lot of issues, but we really need to take a strong stand. It is too easy for people who shouldn't have guns to get guns. Far too easy. I've always stood up to the NRA, even when they send an armed gunman to my home to intimidate me, I will always stand up to them.
Thank you, Delegate Levine. Delegate Rasoul.
Yeah, in the short term, it's COVID, and we have challenges around education, healthcare, and of course, businesses and the economy. And there's a lot that needs to be done there. But in the long term, look, my experience over the past 8 sessions has been there is just so much money in our politics that stymies all of these conversations and trying to make real progress. We've had the trifecta here for a couple of sessions, and we haven't passed meaningful campaign finance reform. The reality is it's hard for us to have great conversations about what to do in the future when there's so much money polluting these conversations. So I hope that we can find a way and push hard, as I know this was a top priority for Governor Northam coming in, but find a way to make some progress in the coming years.
Thank you, Delegate Rasoul. Councilor McClellan.
I'd say the umbrella theme of creating access to opportunity, that we don't have equitable access to opportunity. Not everybody has the opportunity to get a great job, to get access to capital, to honestly access to broadband. I think that's a huge issue that we haven't even mentioned today. What COVID has shown us is that digital divide is now a chasm, and that whether it's kids having to get online to go to school, seniors trying to get a COVID vaccine registration, businesses trying to work off remotely, et cetera. That's a huge issue for us. So, but in general, I would say access to opportunity. So that's, it could mean so many different things. I think what Delegate Rasoul's mentioned for sure. But I would say we just need to have more people sitting at the table with all of us, including the youth.
Thank you, Councilor. Mr. Warren.
Hundreds of small businesses have died. Thousands of people are out of work. Our economic infrastructure is the top priority I'll be focused on, and the Lieutenant Governor actually has a direct responsibility with that. So how are we going to do that? One, we need to tackle COVID and vaccine distribution. I'm glad that Biden administration is really taking the lead on that. So that's very exciting. Number 2, we need to be able to attract new businesses here. 3, you need to support small businesses and existing ones so they could be able to thrive. 4th, we need to make investments in education. I grew up in a household that we always believed that a quality education was the gateway to a better quality of life. So early childhood education, free certificates and associate degrees for Pell eligible students, and to be able to retrain folks to get in jobs with livable wages. That's my focus, economic growth.
Thank you, Mr. Warren. Mr. Perryman.
Well, you asked what's the number. We're looking at some of these issues. They're true for the whole country. When we look at the COVID crisis, that's affecting every single one of us. We all have to figure that out. The economic crisis, the environmental existential threat to our existence. But I would say if I had to pick an issue besides though that was unique to Virginia, I would say our criminal justice system is one that is not the envy of the world. It's very draconian. We are making great improvements under Democrats, but we still have such a long way to go to undo the legacy of Jim Crow here in Virginia. So for me, if it's a unique Virginian issue, it's the criminal justice system and how we reform that to be more equitable.
Thank you, Mr. Perryman. Okay, we are going to open up now to audience questions. We have a question already from Michael Angeloni. His question is, lack of affordable and accessible housing continues to be a significant impediment to people with disabilities and their families achieving economic security. What changes would you push or advocate for to remedy this? We will begin with Delegate Rasoul.
Yeah, we struggle with that around the Commonwealth. And first, the biggest atrocity that we have are the actual waivers that actually allow people to live with some degree of normalcy. To be in one of the richest states in the nation and to have thousands of people waiting on our disability waiver list is clearly unacceptable. And then with regards to how we approach education, housing, and the workplace, we've been so tough in Virginia just to want to be number one for business that we've left so many people behind. And look, society is only as good as how we treat every member. And access to affordable housing in a safe way, especially for our differently abled Virginians, it to me is a basic human right.
Thank you, Delegate Rasoul. Councilor McClellan.
So before running for office, I actually served in the Planning Commission for 3 years, and affordable housing was an issue then, and it's an issue for me now at the local level, and will be an issue for me statewide. I think there are some things that we could be doing in terms of ensuring that we have incentives for when we're talking about LIHTC projects, tax credits, that we can create some incentives for inclusion of more affordable housing for folks who are differently abled there. I think that that's a win-win for everybody there for sure. But this is, this is such a huge issue beyond the housing piece. Is also, you have to look at factor transportation in. I serve as vice chair of our regional transit authority. Paratransit is a huge problem. So you have to make sure that there's accessible transit nearby this affordable housing as well. I'm sorry, 30 seconds isn't enough time to answer all of these issues, but definitely something I would want to focus on as Lieutenant Governor.
Thank you, Councilor. Mr. Warren.
The American with Disabilities Act passed over 30 years ago. We need to continue to improve that, and especially focusing on inclusion with telecommunications and digital as well. We need to be able to support our individuals with disability. I'm someone who actually have members with disability, either if it's mental or physical as well. So we need to support those individuals, especially in housing. It comes at the end of the day that a lot of people cannot get housing because, again, they do not have the financial means. A lot of people with disabilities are great contributors to our economy, and so we need to be able to support them. And it's incumbent that our leaders actually listen to these communities and make sure that they have a seat at the table so they can tell us how we can be able to benefit them.
Thank you, Mr. Warren. Mr. Perryman.
Yeah, so when it comes to affordable housing for all of us, I host these weekly chats every Wednesday at 7 on my Facebook live stream. I've talked to experts about this, and I say, what's the number one way we can address affordable housing? They say pay people a living wage. The same is true for people with disabilities. Obviously, we do have a huge issue here with our waiver system and the backlog, but it's atrocious that we were able to pay them a sub-minimum wage. This is something that we've been working to address. Obviously, the minimum wage is going to go up. It's not going up soon enough. It's not going up high enough. This is something that we absolutely have to address if we want a truly equitable Virginia with affordable housing, where people don't have to string together 2 or 3 jobs in order to get housing that's adequate.
Thank you, Mr. Perryman. Delegate Levine.
So I agree with what my colleagues have said here. In the Virginia House of Delegates, we've given a lot more money. I've worked hard championing to give more money to the Housing Trust Fund. We have provided more ID and DD waivers, not near enough, of course. And we have worked to have some of the tax incentives to encourage people to put affordable housing. At the end of the day, it is all about wages. It's about jobs. It's about people earning enough to make a living. It's about folks with disabilities earning the same minimum wages as everyone else. It's about having the kinds of jobs as they have in a corporation in my district to provide specifically for people with disabilities. There are things that folks with autism do better than those of us without autism, finding the right jobs for the right people. But at the heart of it, it's about increasing people's ability to pay, and that intersectionality of race and poverty and transportation and immigration status and all of it, so that everyone can get affordable housing.
Thank you, Delegate Levine. And thank you all for your answers on that. We're going to have one more question before we move on to closing statements. This is a follow-up question from Julius Spain Sr. He asks, what are your thoughts regarding school resource officers in public schools? We will start with Councilor McClellan.
So I watched or have experienced personally a situation where a family that we've become close to and supported for years, where their 8th grader was let out of our middle school in handcuffs and spent 3 days in jail. He did something stupid in school, but certainly not something that would rectify or justify anything along those lines. That's a problem. I think our SROs need to be better trained. I think we need additional services, mental health services, folks who have trauma-informed care backgrounds in our schools. The system right now doesn't work, and it needs to be reformed.
Thank you, Counselor. Mr. Warren.
Yes, I want to say hello, Julius, out there in NAACP Arlington. So very familiar with Julius, a great individual. So what we have to do, we have to stop the school to prison pipeline. We need to, it used to be when a child is deemed, you need attention to them. Usually you call parents or there's different actions. Now it seems like they just automatically call law enforcement, and I think that's wrong. So we have to stop that right away. And I will also, as Lieutenant Governor, make sure that we enact that we do not send children to officers, because again, they cannot learn that way, and it dismantles families. So I'm totally against that.
Thank you, Mr. Warren. Mr. Perryman.
Well, I believe I'm the only one here who's really advocated on this issue, and I'll speak plainly. We need to remove the cops from the schools. It's as simple as that. This is something that when we talk about the school to prison pipeline, that's a nice euphemism for what we're doing, but we're criminalizing childlike behavior. And when we introduce a cop into a school setting, we know what's going to happen. It's going to lead to the increase in arrests of Black, brown, and students with disabilities, period. This is a trend nationwide. So we need to remove the cops from the schools. We need more counselors in our schools. And that's where I stand on that issue of SROs. It's the work I've done here in Fairfax County and the work I've pushed for throughout the whole Commonwealth, working with Delegate Kay Corey and others.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Perryman. Delegate Levine.
So I've opposed school resource officers ever since I've been in the Virginia House of Delegates. Look, the name itself is Orwellian. They're not resource officers. They are policemen. Hey, we should at least call them the school police so everyone knows who they are. When you're a police officer, what are you looking for? You're looking for people who've committed crimes. You're looking for people who are likely to be prone to violence. And sometimes when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. When I was a kid in my school, we had what you might really call a school resource officer. His name was Mr. Perry, and he was a counselor. And if you had trouble, you came and you talked to him about what's going on in your family, what's going on with your schoolwork. If there was trouble between kids, he would bring y'all together, and he did not carry a weapon. That's the resource we need. I would end school resource officers as they currently exist. And finally, I introduced and passed into law a bill to train teachers in de-escalation techniques, conflict de-escalation, so that we don't have people acting like police officers in our schools.
Thank you, Delegate Levine. Delegate Rasoul.
Yeah, it's clear that the data shows that it does not reduce school to prison pipeline. In fact, it's just further intimidating, and so many of our youth see this as a threat. It does not create an environment that is warm and inclusive, and instead creates this patriarchal approach. And so we've got to stop over-policing our schools. To me, that there's a social and emotional burden on all of this. I've supported this legislation in the past and will continue to as well.
Thank you, Delegate Rasoul. I'm ready. We will start with closing statements. These will be 1 minute. We will begin with Mr. Warren.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you all for your time. Happy Saturday, you all. Again, happy Passover. One of the things, a lot of topics we keep talking about, and we've been talking about it for years. We've been talking about livable wages. We've been talking about supporting unions. We've been talking about affordable housing, quality education, quality healthcare, livable wages. We've been talking about that for years, even broadband internet, and nothing has ever happened. I would say if you want the status quo, you want the same old Virginia, vote for the other candidates. If you want change, and the change that, my commencement speaker, Barack Obama, talked about being the leader and leading change we want to see in Virginia, lead a change we want to see in America, and also be the next generational leaders. I'm here for economic empowerment, economic and financial growth for families, because at the end of the day, the reason why people cannot get quality healthcare, education, housing, or insurance because they do not have the financial means. And we have families out there that was hurting before COVID, and COVID made it worse. So we need to focus on our economic infrastructure to be able to build back families and make sure that Virginia is the leader when we're talking about family growth. Thank you. God bless.
Thank you, Mr. Warren. Mr. Perryman.
Well, thanks to everyone who attended. I really appreciate it. This is all great fun for these events. I'm glad you got to know the candidates better. To the straw pollers who may be elsewhere, hello to them. But I want to say that, you know, the issues we're facing here are serious, and we need serious people addressing them. Whether we're talking about the climate crisis or economic crisis, we need people who are building a movement that includes all of us, and it's policy driven. This is how we're going to solve our problems. This is how we're not only going to build the Virginia we deserve, this is how we're going to lead for the rest of the country. It's the first election after Trump, after January 6th. As Democrats, we have an opportunity here to show what we can do in Virginia, and that progressives can win statewide. So thank you for having me. I hope you will join us at perrymanforvirginia.com.
Thank you, Mr. Perryman. Delegate Levine.
My life is proof that one person working with a bunch of other dedicated people can make a difference. Whether it's marriage equality movement, or my work to help victims of domestic violence, my work in Congress, or my work in the General Assembly. I was 20 years an activist outside before I worked inside, and I still work outside government. I still lead protests. You can make a difference. And as Lieutenant Governor, I'm going to go around throughout the Commonwealth on a full-time job. That's really important. Spend 12 months a year at the job, talking with people, bringing people together, transforming the whole idea of a lieutenant governor. Look, if you want the most progressive in the race, I'm the most progressive. Look at my voting record, second in the VA Plan Index of all members of the House of Delegates, and the most in this race. But look at our course of action. Look at my life history. I have gotten things done where people said it was impossible, and I can do that as Lieutenant Governor for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Levine. Delegate Rasoul.
Yeah, first 251 straw poll voters. I think that somebody got a little happy with the submit button. So I wouldn't take that one to the bank if I were you all. The second thing I'll mention is, you know, look, when I first started running for office, I was inspired after the 2006 midterm election. And it was all about process, bringing something different, really believing in a better way to win. And really the future of progressive politics. And if you really care about advancing a lot of these policies, we have to focus on building broad coalitions. And there's a difference between unity and coalition. Today is a great example. These organizations coming together to form a coalition today to bring these LG candidates in shows us what coalitions can do. The difference is each of you maintain your own unique individual voices, but we work towards common goals. That's the future of progressive politics. That's what I believe in, and that's what I'll continue to push for as your next Lieutenant Governor.
Thank you, Delegate Rasoul. Councilor McClellan.
Thank you for the organizers for bringing us together today. And I'm very impressed with the youth who are here. I got my started in politics in high school as student council president of my high school of 3,000 students. So it's a great place to get started. And I hope to see some of you in the future running your own campaigns. So listen, I'm running to become Lieutenant Governor because I want to create more equitable access to opportunity for all Virginians. When I ran in 2016, I was told to wait my turn and it wasn't my time. And I will tell you now, as I look at this opportunity in 2021, I think it's about time now for Virginia to elect its first female lieutenant governor. I've got the 30 years of experience in the private sector, the public sector, working on the environment and the nonprofit arena to hit the ground running on day one. And I hope to earn your support in the future. And I will hope you will consider coming to andriaforvirginia.com to learn more. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Councilor. I am pleased to announce that at the very least, y'all will be very punctual Lieutenant Governors because we finished exactly at 5 p.m. I want to thank all the candidates for attending today, and thanks to the Democratic Youth Coalition. Thank you to all the attendees. I'm dropping my information in the chat right now. If you ever want to contact me about College Democrats of America, we are always looking for new members across all of our campuses. I think we're in over 40 state federations now, so always reach out to me if you're interested in organizing with us. And if Tura or Ashi have any more comments before we end?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much, Keith, for agreeing to moderate this event. I'm not going to keep you all any longer, as I'm sure you have very, very busy weekends, but just thank you so much again for this wonderful conversation. It was great to hear about all your opinions.